everybody. I am Marina and I'm your host at UNBOSSED. UNBOSSED is a podcast I've created to highlight women with amazing paths of success here in Chicago. Last year, I set out to interview the only 40 female CTOs in the city, and this year I've expanded to female CEOs and women in politics and government in Chicago. I'm excited to share these interviews with you, and I hope you contact me at www.unbossed.io or email me at marina@unbossed.io. Hope to see you soon.
Shelley Davis has dedicated her career in the nonprofit and philanthropic sector and is a lifelong Chicago Southsider who grew up in the South Shore neighborhood. In her early career, she provided crisis intervention, counseling, and policy advocacy. She began working in philanthropy during graduate school at the University of Illinois Chicago with a fellowship at the Field Foundation. Shelley credits excellent mentoring and training at the Ford Foundation and the Joyce Foundation for guiding her development as a grant maker, instilling a deep appreciation for and privilege for the responsibilities of moving resources to benefit communities and preparing her for the challenges of senior management. For the past 10 years, Shelley has held leadership roles as vice president at the Chicago Foundation for Women, and in 2013, as the inaugural executive director of the Forest Preserve Foundation, where she raised funds and made grants to support ecological restoration projects in canning preserves and opportunities for families and children from a diversity of backgrounds to enjoy nature. Equally important to Shelley are her civic commitments. She is board chair of the Albert Frick Jr. Foundation, trustee of Lawrence University, where she earned a bachelor's degree in psychology, and she serves as an Illinois Commissioner of Juvenile Justice. Shelley is committed to social justice, equity, and to paying it forward to the next generation. She's a lecturer and a senior mentor at University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy, focusing on nonprofit and philanthropic organizations' impact on public policy. In 2017, USC's College of Urban Planning and Public Affairs honored Shelley with the Jim Merrick Alumni Appreciation Award, which recognizes individuals for their dedication to the fields of urban planning and public administration and their contribution to the development of the college students and alumni. In 2018 and 2019, Make It Better recognized Shelley as one of Chicago's top Black women of impact. In 2019, University of Chicago Harris Public Policy students named Shelley as Mentor of the Year. She keeps herself healthy by studying yoga, biking, and swimming. She enjoys taking long walks and traveling. Shelley lives in Brownsville with her husband and 2 teenage children. Welcome, Shelley.
Hey, everyone. I'm Marina, back with you from the podcast UNBOSSED. I am your host, and today I have a very important and special guest. Her name is Shelley Davis. She is the president and CEO of the Coleman Foundation. Welcome, Shelley. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me today.
Nice. I see right off the bat, I see you're in an office space. Are you back in the office?
We are slowly moving back into the office. So we don't have, so what's great about being in the office right now is that we spent the winter freshening it up, like it had not had a fresh coat of paint in years.
Right.
We also built out individual offices so we can distance. So there are 2 other people in the office with me today. But we don't expect to have a full return to work policy in place until the fall. So we'll take it easy, but my daughter just went back. She's in a CPS high school down the street. She goes to Whitney Young, and our office is in the West Loop. So on the days that she's assigned to be in school, I am starting to come into the office, which is really quite convenient.
Nice. How do you feel about going back to the office personally, perhaps?
I am so happy, quite frankly. I really need the separation between work and home. I love the routine of saying goodbye to my family, quite frankly, and going someplace else and working really hard and coming home and relaxing. So I feel pretty good about it. I will miss some things about working from home, mainly the commute between exercising and showering and getting to that 8:30 Zoom. But I anticipate that we'll end up with some sort of hybrid schedule where I'll be in the office 3 days a week probably, and then work from home 2, at least over the next year or so.
Yeah, as I've been talking to this women for the podcast that are in positions of leadership at their companies, I've asked this question before, and maybe you can give me insight. What are your employees saying about what they want the future of work to be at the Coleman Foundation?
Yeah, we haven't had a deliberate conversation yet. So right now we are planning for our first time for all of us to be together in July for a staff board retreat. And so everyone is very excited about that. And we have rented out space at Ravinia. So we have full outdoor space, full social distance space. I think everyone is excited about that piece, but we haven't had a deliberate conversation about how folks feel about coming into the office. We're an interesting configuration because we're only 6 people total on staff, and 3 of us are new. So me as the CEO, we have a CFO that is brand new. He's a month into his role. And we have an executive assistant that supports the C-suite, and she just passed her year mark. So she started in the pandemic. Wow. She started last April. So we have 3 of us that are very new, and so we are happily in the office today together. We were happy to be together. And then we have 3 staff that have been on staff with us anywhere from 7 to 20 years. So they are in a very different headspace in terms of like been there, done that. I think they love us, but they also, I think, have felt a relief of working from home. So in fact, I have 2 people on my staff that I've never met before in person. So it's just interesting. But what I've learned is that being in a new role, the value of in-office time it cannot be replaced on Zoom. So just the point of running into somebody in the hallway or having a quick 5-minute, let's talk about that later conversation, or clarifying something, knocking on somebody's door and sitting down for 10 minutes can't be replaced with Zoom interaction. And all of those nuances, I think, are really critical in terms of building a good, cohesive team.
Nice. I'm glad you're thinking about it as your role. But before we further continue talking about your professional career, I wanted to take you back a little bit. Would you mind telling us a story about Shelley as a girl? Did you grow up in Chicago? What were you doing? Did you think, what were you thinking about studying? Did you think you'll ever be president of a foundation like you
are? So I grew up in the Chicago Children's Choir, and loved, so spent all my time from the time I was 8 years old until I was, 18 or 22 in choirs of some way, shape, or form, singing. But I didn't want a music career. But when I was a senior in high school, I also went to Whitney Young, just like my daughter. So when I was a senior in high school, or maybe a junior, my choir director asked me to come sit down next to her on the piano bench. And she said, what are you going to do in college? And I said, I'm going to be a psychology major. I want to be a therapist. I want to be a psychoanalyst, blah, blah. I think I'm good at listening to people. I think I can help people. And she said, well, you should be a music therapist because you're really good, and you should do a dual degree and get a music education degree and get a psychology degree and figure out a way of putting those together. So I did go to college and started with both dual degrees, music education and psychology, and did that for 2 years. And I was miserable. It was way too hard to balance both. My voice teacher, and I really, it wasn't that we didn't get along. It was that she was really pushing me in a direction of being a performance major in a way that I had no interest in. And so when I was a sophomore in college, at the end of my sophomore year, I went to study in London, and I wrote my parents this very long letter saying, like, I'm not going to go back to school. I need to transfer. I'm so unhappy. My parents are very old school, so like kids were kind of heard, you definitely seen, but maybe heard a little bit, but pretty old school. They never responded to my letter. So we never talked about it. So I wrote that to them. I wrote them that letter, spring of my sophomore year. And then our teacher, our faculty advisor, whoever was taking care of us in this apartment dorm in London, says, it's time to register for classes. Like, you're going to be a junior, it's time to register for classes. Like, oh, I just was sent this letter saying I wasn't going to go back to school. What am I supposed to do? So one of my friends stopped by, and I told him I was leaving campus. He's still a good friend to this day. And he says, oh, yeah, I thought about leaving once. He said, but, you know, sometimes credits don't transfer over, and then you don't graduate in 4 years, and it's just kind of a pain, so I'm just going to stick it out. I was like, that's interesting. I didn't know that all credits don't transfer, and what does that mean? So I got my registration materials, and I calculated what it would take for me to graduate if I dropped my music degree and just pursued my psychology degree, which was always my plan, to have a psychology degree. And I realized that if I dropped my music degree, I had enough credits that by the time I was a senior, I probably did not need to be a full-time student.
Oh, nice.
So I did that. I registered, dropped my music degree, went back to school, talked to my my voice coach, my voice teacher, and told her I had dropped my music degree, but that I wanted to continue to study with her. And she gave me so much praise and love and said, this is great. Now you don't have to learn German. Now you don't have to learn Italian. Let's learn all the things that make sense for your heritage. I learned the entire Nego spiritual canon.
Wow.
I sang in 2 choirs. I had this full life. And by the time I was a senior, it was true. I was pretty much a part-time student living on campus. I played pool and darts every night. Like, I had this amazing college experience.
Beautiful.
And now I'm a trustee of my university to this day. So, and the guy that told me not to transfer is the chair of our board of trustees.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. That's a long, beautiful story.
Sorry, it's a long story, but it's just so funny how everything turns out for a reason.
It's beautiful. It's long in the sense, like, I'm glad you gave me so much detail, because it's the context that makes it so beautiful. And so, what were some of the lessons that you took from that experience?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that maybe I didn't take it right away, but I'm learning it now, is to really listen to everyone's advice. Mm-hmm. So people say that feedback is a gift, and that's true. And in my 20s and 30s, and honestly, even part of my early 40s, I didn't really believe it. I was like, they don't really know, or maybe I thought that feedback was kind of optional to take. And in fact, it's really not. Like, people, when they say something in their out loud voice, they usually mean it, or they always mean it. And if you really believe that folks are really operating with 80 to 100% of positive intent, they're really trying to be helpful. Mm. They're really trying to be helpful. So one of my board members was just here this morning, and I was talking through all of the things that I've learned over these past 6 months in this role. And she's like, you might want to consider doing X, Y, Z. She's like, I'm not telling you what to do. You're the CEO. You make your own decisions. She's like, but I'm giving you my best advice. And I was like, of course I'll do it. You're giving me your best advice. Like, you've been on this board X number of years. I've been here 6 months. Why wouldn't I take that advice wholeheartedly?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I also heard in your story something about sticking to what you want to do versus what I feel like other people may view as your capabilities are. Even if you're good at some of the things, maybe they're not just for you in that moment.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I feel like I have had pretty good clarity about what I wanted, or what I, not at every, I don't have a 100-year plan. I don't have a personal 25-year plan, but I think I've been pretty good about, making decisions that give me push and stretch, finding plateau, and then finding new opportunities that give me more push and more stretch.
Nice. Awesome. Great. And so tell us, and we can come back to like those decisions and how you push and stretch yourself in a second. And maybe as you talk about your professional career, keep that in mind, because I think what comes out from you next is like, how did you get to then become the president? Like, and I know it takes a lot of time and life experience and years, but to the best of your abilities, like, can you provide a little bit of an explanation of like how does one become a president of a foundation?
Yeah.
For people that may be interested in pursuing something similar.
Well, the crazy thing about foundations in philanthropy in general is that there is no linear path. So foundations on average are very small. Like I said, I have 6 people on staff. We have $200 million in assets, and we have 6 people on staff.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. It doesn't really take a lot of headcount to thoughtfully and strategically give money away. It just takes a lot of smart people, but not a lot of headcount. So I ended up working in a foundation. So when I finished college, I did a lot of nonprofit work. I did direct service, I did advocacy, and then I went to grad school. And when I was doing advocacy work, I worked directly under an executive director, and I sat in a lot of meetings with foundation staff, and I wrote a lot of grant reports and proposals with her. And so I thought I would, and every time a foundation staff would visit our office and leave, she would complain about them, like, oh my God, here's a new person. Now we have to tell our story over again. And, but then every time we got a grant, she would celebrate, and there were just all these highs and lows with us fundraising and working towards our mission.
Yeah.
And so by the time I went to grad school, I was thinking, oh my God, those foundation people, they make arbitrary decisions. They don't know how hard they're making grantees work. Like I had all of these criticisms about how terrible foundations were. And I went home one day. My parents live in South Shore. I was living in Hyde Park at the time. And I went home one day and my dad said, so what are you going to do? Like, it was a 2-year program, my master's degree.
Yeah.
And
in urban development, right?
Yeah, urban planning and policy is my degree. So basically public policy. And he says, what are you going to do? Like, how's it going? I said, I don't know. I have to do an internship between my first and second year, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. And he says, well, you should. I said, because I said when I finish, I think I'll just be, somebody's executive director. I'll just go, run a nonprofit. And he says, okay, well, if you're going to do that, like you should call the community trust and you should call the field foundation and see if they'll take you on as an intern, so understand the field.
Yeah.
So I did what he said, and I called the field foundation and they hired me for the summer, and I was trained by the CEO to be a program officer. And practically the rest is history. I did that. He became my lifelong mentor. I went back to school. I ended up, for my second year, I ended up with a job description of a junior staff person at the Ford Foundation. I called my mentor at the Field Foundation. He says, I'm going to write you the best recommendation. You're going to get this job and move to New York. I did. I moved to New York. I came back home and just worked my way up by switching jobs. So foundations are typically flat. And so there is no place to go. Like you get a job and you learn as much as you can in the job. And then ideally you move on.
Okay.
And so
kind of like get out to go out kind of thing.
Yeah. So I ended up, I think this is my 5th or 7th foundation job over the past 20 plus years. And it's not an easy path, and it really makes no sense. So how would somebody get this job? I have no idea, really. Like it's a combination of accumulated skill, and timing and chemistry and clarity in a way that there is no recipe or formula.
All right. And let's talk about maybe the job, right, itself. Is like, what is the best part of your job, and perhaps what is the not so, I'm going to say worse, but the things that are not that exciting.
So the best part of the job, and I don't do this often because I'm not a program officer anymore, is every once in a while I get to talk to a grantee that tells me a really great story about how Coleman resources help them do whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And that is so much fun. And I think as the world opens up, I'll be able to see organizations more and talk to more folks. But I've met over 200 people so far that have received Coleman resources, that have told me stories. And so that's great. That's the best. That's what we live for, right? That's what we do.
Yeah. Just a quick note. Would you mind telling us, as you say that, also like what Coleman Foundation focuses on and the purpose of that? Yeah.
Yeah. So we have two. If you look on our website, we have 3 issue areas right now, but to me, they fall into 2 big buckets. One is entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. So supporting those with small businesses, making sure that they have the skill set to make those businesses be successful. The other thing are 2 health issues. One is cancer care, and the other is health and disability care. So really, when I talk about our work, I talk about entrepreneurship and health equity. And so those are the 2 things that we do.
Nice. And you serve nonprofit 501c3s?
Yes, they're all 501c3s. Correct.
Okay, great. And so, okay, and then the worst part of
the worst part of the job. Well, right now, the worst part of my job has been picking furniture
for the office.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, we've been going through this office renovation. I do not like making decisions about details because I change my mind once I start them. So the worst part, luckily our executive assistant is amazing and she's a visionary and she can think this through, but I get really impatient. I make decisions that I regret once I'm living with them. Like there's just all of these things that I'd rather not do.
You sound like me when I have to pick a chair as like start with this grandiose idea and then I'm like, do I even need to sit? Like I don't know. Like
I know. Or yeah, I was picking chairs last week and I was like, how much do these cost? And are they gonna break? And like I don't like dealing with details in a way that I just want things to get done. And then I was walking around this morning asking our assistant, I was like, and when is the furniture coming? And she's like, at the end of the month. I was like, my God, why isn't it here in 2 days? Didn't we order from Amazon? We didn't. So I think that everything should get here in 2 days. So I'm very impatient and I have a pretty short attention span for details. I am much better at the sort of the macro. I love living in the macro level where we can think about vision and think about mission and think about values.
Yeah. Speaking of macro level, I thought it was super cool that you decided to go to London throughout your as a student. How was that experience for you as a black woman in America, transported into old English town?
Yeah.
But I love London, one of my favorite cities, and I think is extremely progressive in many ways, extremely diverse, extremely open to different. But yeah, it's still there's a lot of like old London in there as well. How was that experience for you?
It was great. I did it twice. In fact, I did it as an undergrad and I did it as a grad student. It's and if I could do it over again, I would, and probably pick a different place where I'd be stretched on language. But it was, I think people don't recognize how interesting it feels to be in a place where people don't automatically assume that you're American.
Yes.
So it was really easy for me to walk the streets of London, and until I opened my mouth, people assume that I live there. Whereas if I walk the streets of the north side here, nobody assumes that I live there. And so it was really, really liberating and freeing for me in a way that I found relaxing and less stressful than I do sometimes here in Chicago.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have the same. I've had the same experience in London, and also like part of my family is now in Holland. So I've had the same experience in those 2 places where there's enough diversity, enough different, where people just assume you're just part of the community in the group.
Yeah. No, it's just it's good, you know, like it was great to feel like, wow, do I belong here more than I do at home?
Yeah. What do you tell your daughter about studying abroad or visit, traveling and things like that?
Yeah. So I have a junior in high school that's a girl, and I have a son that is in seventh grade, a boy. And for both of them, especially now, with my daughter, we're on this college
Tour. Tour
tour.
course.
Yeah. We visited 4 so far and probably have 6 more to go. So we've been only looking at schools that ideally have a study abroad option, because it's just like, when else are you going to do that on your parents' dime, really? Like, we can figure it out now when she's younger, but after that, you got to pay for it yourself. So she knows what a meaningful experience that was for me, and both our kids have not. They've had some experiences out of the country, but not a ton. We were lucky enough to travel to Ghana 10 years ago, and visit with a women's organization that was just spectacular. And I think they were so little at the time, it was 10 years ago, that they only remember certain things and didn't recognize. I think they knew it was special, but don't realize like how unique that is to travel with. I think we were at a cohort of probably 20 other Americans going to see these African women that were doing this amazing work around HIV positive women and women in politics and all these other genres, in a way that's like, wow, like this is extraordinary.
Yeah, and this is a perfect segue actually into what I also wanted to touch on, which is your work with women. You are Vice President of Program Advocacy, promoted from Director at the Chicago Foundation for Women. You've been a huge advocate for and speaker of women's issues in Chicago. Now I just realized that you did this trip to Africa. Where do you want to start? Where does your work with women start? And yeah,
yeah. So back to college, I when I came back from London, and I was sitting with my best friend, and she says, I'm going to go volunteer at the domestic violence shelter in town.
Yeah.
And she was a psychology major just like me, and I was like, okay, well, I'll do that with you. And I stayed working in that shelter for 2 years, my junior and senior year. And so initially, like I said, I wanted to be a therapist. I thought, well, I'll build a women's practice, and I will work on, all the issues that women deal with, whether it's depression or stress, whatever. So I did women's issues work for a long time. So I came back home. I worked in a domestic violence agency here. Then I moved on to an advocacy organization that focused on women and employment issues. And so that's really sort of just been baked into my career, and have always found an opportunity to advocate on behalf of women, to support women, and to really think about women's leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the I'm thinking the way I want to talk about it, and tell me what you think about this, or if it's different. But I kind of want to know, and I'm eager to learn, like, what did you learn from this experience of working with? What are the biggest issues, the most prominent issues that women face here locally in Chicago? And then how does your experience in Africa compare to what you've seen here, and maybe influenced your work as well?
Yeah. Well, I didn't spend enough time in Africa to really make a big generalization, but so I think there are a couple of things. One is that there's a challenge that we'll always have with what are the needs of women of color versus what are the needs of women writ large,
Overall.
right? And it's really easy for women of color, the nuances that women of color face, to get lost in women's issues and women's movement writ large. I think we could see that. One example is the Me Too movement, right? Where we know that low-income women and women of color have been dealing with all kinds of atrocious abuses and neglect and low and underpay and no pay forever. Whereas when the prominence of the Me Too movement, well, I felt like, came out, it was really the faces of the movement weren't diverse, and the messages felt more about middle income and high income women, and
Mostly
really,
white.
mostly white. That was really the tip of the iceberg in terms of truly what all women face in terms of discrimination and abuse.
Yes.
And so that's just one example of how we continue to get lost in the conversation when we have a gender lens only leading the conversation.
So what you're saying is we should take a gender stand and add
race and class.
A race and class position as well, in order to make sure that we serve the most, because in order to serve everybody, we need to serve the ones that are mostly underserved.
That's correct.
And then we can take care of everybody else.
Yeah. Then we lift all boats. Absolutely.
How do you see class? I think sometimes in this conversation, race and class become at times one and only. Is there any example of race and class differences amongst women and women needs that you've seen that you can talk about?
I think one of the things that we just need to be really aware of is intergenerational wealth. And so when I really think about my understanding, or even listening to the stories of people's lives and what they're really facing, there are people that are really living on the edge, and I am very privileged and comfortable in this way where I'm not. But even just simple examples. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place. But even simple examples, like when the pandemic happened, we had people that were really, and people that are still holding on, like on fingers edges, on making sure that they can feed their families and be safe. And there are people that left to go to their second and third homes, right? They went to a grandfather's property or something else. And you never know when that's going to come up. But it continued to come up in stories about how people sheltered in place, or what people did while they were sheltering in place. Oh, we decided to rip out all our bathrooms and remodel them because we're home and we're dealing with this, versus somebody that's like, yeah, like I turned off my cable and I made sure that I took advantage of whatever I need to take advantage of. There's this like such disparity.
Yes.
In a way that to me is just getting so much worse. It's not just to me. I mean, the statistics say so, in terms of the haves and the have-nots that really make me nervous for the future.
Yeah. I mean, the new administration has been proposing more progressive laws and legislation around supporting families, supporting women, supporting more free, affordable education, as well as childcare and other things. What are you most excited about recently that you've seen coming out of either the administration, or maybe some of the work that some of your foundation or other foundations are doing in Chicago?
Well, in terms of the Biden administration, what I'm most excited about is the news yesterday that they would lift international patents so that the global South will have access to vaccine and COVID. I continue to be disturbed by greed and corporate greed, quite frankly, even in the midst of a global pandemic, in a way that is destroying humanity.
Absolutely. What other work with women specifically, and taking you back to this, are you been doing, or maybe look forward doing in the future in Chicago specifically?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can really answer that. Right now, I've been spending a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time with other foundation leaders. There are a lot of us, that women of color that are leading foundations in Chicago. I hear they're 23, but I think we might be edging up to 25 because people keep moving around. So that's a really powerful network for me personally and professionally, where we support each other and when we're dealing with hard questions, but we also have a lot of joy and love with each other. So for example, we were on a call a couple of days ago, and one of us told us that she was really struggling health-wise, and so we ended the call with this group prayer that was so powerful.
Nice.
And I feel I consider myself a spiritual person. I start my day with meditation, but don't really I don't really spend a lot of time in group prayer. But it was so powerful that now I feel like I'm getting all choked up. One person said that, she said, "I'm a woman of faith. Anybody that wants to stay on the call, I'll do this." And I was like, and we all stayed and we all did it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really powerful. It was really, really powerful.
I think that's, healing, maybe not only for her, but also everybody else in the call, that it's remarkable and overdue to have strong Black women in positions such that they can actually affect economically communities and really push forth agendas that are of growth and of healing for our communities. And I think that's what I heard as part of the undertone.
Yeah. Well, and because we have to take care of each other, we have to take care of ourselves, or else we can't continue to give to everybody else.
And speaking of, right before the call, I was telling you, it was there's a lot of times where we are thrown into positions without getting the appropriate training, right? Or without being really introduced to it. We're just thrown into the job and we're like, here you go, go handle it now. Is this kind of what you all do? You support each other professionally? And perhaps, what is it like to face those challenges solo, and also now having the support of this group?
Yeah. So I think what's interesting is that most of us, or I'll just speak for myself, I don't have an MBA, right? So I imagine in an MBA type of training, folks are learning how to report to boards of directors. I've learned that on the job, not on this job, but my previous job as head of the Forest Preserve Foundation, and in previous jobs before that, supporting CEOs that were directly reporting to boards. So I feel like I've learned a lot more in my adult life through mentors and through support networks than having formal training, and that is the beauty and the ugliness of the nonprofit sector, is that we do learn more within role than we do within the classroom.
Nice. And how do you ask or seek that advice when you need to? Because sometimes it can be hard to admit that you don't know how to do something, or perhaps I'll speak for myself, it's hard for me to admit that, because I feel like I already have to perform at a such a different level than other people, that it is hard to ask for help, or it's hard to say like, hey, can you help me? I don't know how to do this, or I need help with this.
Yeah. I think the older I've become, the easier it is for me to ask for help. So I turned 50 last year, and I ask for help, like, I don't know, once an hour, every other hour with something. So I think it took me a long time, and really probably only in the past 10 years, I realized that most people don't know what they're doing, that they're just better actors than I am. I am way too transparent to spend a lot of energy acting. And I also recognize that asking for help oftentimes is flattery for somebody else that gets you more. It gets you more. It gets you more advice. It gets you more buy-in in terms of your success. It just gets you more. And so it is very. I am always happy to ask for advice, and I've also learned how to promise to learn more. So when I get a hard question that I know the answer to, I'm like, I will figure it out. Give me a moment. I will figure it out.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. We are almost at time, and I have one more question for you about your foundation, and then we can close up. But believe it or not, this is almost it. It happens super fast.
Yes.
So I think my last question about the foundation, specifically about the Coleman Foundation, is around your imprint. And so just as president and CEO of the foundation, what is the mark that you want to leave, whether it's now or later? What are you planning? What is coming up for you? And talk to us about that.
So I just got here, so who knows when I'm leaving. And but I will say that I was on a call with one of our board members, actually our board chair, last week, and he just makes my heart sing. So he said something like, when I go off into the sunset, I want to see the Coleman Foundation do big things, because there's just too much inequity in the world.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, there's my North Star. There's, because me too, right? Like, we are one contributor to be a counterweight in terms of the inequity that we see in our community and in our city. And that's what gets me up every day. That's what makes me proud when we turn off the lights here. And I'm excited. I continue to be energized by that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for the great work you do. Okay, last few questions. Is there a book that you have gifted the most, or that you want, or a resource, book or resource that you've gifted the most, or that you've read recently and really struck with you?
Oh my God, this should be the easiest question in the world, and it totally is not.
Are you an avid reader?
It's not because I'm an avid reader. It's because I'm reading, but it is because I'm reading so much. I'm always like sharing or not sharing. Right. So I will share. This is not. So I've been spending a lot of time trying to read more around leadership and culture and team building, because of this new role. And I spent time in December reading, I think it's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yeah.
And it's not because this is not commentary on our team here at Coleman, but I did want to understand that in a way of how I spend every day thinking about how to make our team more cohesive and stronger, because we've gone through this leadership transition. So I can't say that I've gifted it, but I do feel like the way that those stories were told about that new CEO coming in after a long-term leader resonated with me, and learning how to support the team to work together in a way was very inspiring to me.
Beautiful, thank you. Is there a book you would write, and what would be about?
I don't know if I have a book in me. My husband is a professor, so he's always writing. So I don't consider that. I don't consider writing books as a part of my identity. If I wrote a book, it probably would end up being some sort of nonfiction memoir, personal essay that would probably be very ordinary. And I don't mean that to diminish my life. It's more about, I think there's a missing narrative about Black families and Black middle class families, and just having regular problems and also just joy. So we hear a lot of narrative about folks that have had really hard lives, that it's totally true, and overcoming the odds. And we hear a tiny bit about extraordinarily Oprah's and Cosby when he was in Vogue and all this stuff. And we don't have a lot of Black middle class families where we have ordinary lives and ordinary struggles and joy. And so if I wrote a book that nobody would buy, because it would be pretty much like, I had to make a decision about whether to go to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks this morning, and yet I got there and, felt like I was the last to be served because I was Black, just things that are like just normal stuff that folks don't think of as normal stuff. Because they assume that all Black folks have a, I don't know, some sort of tragic story and something that's harder. And sometimes it's not harder. Like, it's what we're supposed to be doing as Black middle class folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. It's almost like a Black experience of the middle class life almost.
yeah. And that's why I hear that. That's why Issa Rae is one of my faves, right? So I saw an interview with her that was talking about like where are we? Where are we? Where we can just tell our story in a way that makes sense. And so I miss that. I miss seeing that all the time when I'm watching TV or something else. It's like, no, we're not always just the silent best friend. We're not always funny. In fact, like, we're working hard and we take ourselves seriously, and we have relationships like everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. My podcast is called UNBOSSED, and part of the story, just to give you a little bit, is charting my own path in some ways, and working for, I was using air quotes, working for the man, but also not feeling like you're working for the man. Do you know what unbossed could mean to you if you were to give it a meaning?
No. I don't know what unbossed means. I remember watching a political debate and one of the candidates calling herself unbossed. I was like, what does that mean? So, and maybe it's because I've been working for boards for more than 10 years now, and they're my bosses, but they're my thought partners, right? Or maybe it's because I've had great mentors, and I think the best bosses are not telling folks what to do, but thinking with them about how everybody grows to be their best self.
Beautiful. I think that's a perfect ending to this lovely hour that I spent with you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I look forward following you and hearing what you do with the foundation and supporting your foundation however way I can. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks for the opportunity. It was a pleasure today.
Absolutely. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.